The Empire's fleet emerged from the depths of space, casting long shadows over Earth's atmosphere. Massive ships, each the size of a city, hung like silent behemoths, glistening with an intimidating sheen that reflected the light of distant stars. Their hulls, reinforced with a rare alloy that could withstand the mightiest weapons known to the galaxy, were hailed by the Empire as Unbreakable. For centuries, the Empire's military might had gone unchallenged, its fleet invincible. Every race, every world it had conquered had bowed before its power. Humanity, however, had remained a small, distant thorn in the side of the Empire. Until now. Supreme Commander Zartak stood on the command deck of Imperium, the largest and most powerful ship in the fleet. His eyes gleamed with cold, imperial pride as he surveyed the vast fleet ready to rain destruction upon Earth. The message had already been sent to the human leaders. The war was over before it had even begun. The unbreakable ships would reduce Earth's defenses to rubble, and humanity would finally be subjugated under the Empire's rule. He smiled at the thought. The victory would be swift. On Earth, the situation was less certain. President Harper and the Joint Military Command were in a war room, watching the slowly encroaching ships on their monitors. Despite all their preparations, they knew they were outmatched. The Empire's weapons were far beyond anything humanity could defend against. The satellites they had set up to detect the fleet were failing one by one. The remnants of humanity's space stations and orbital defense grids stood no chance. "We have no choice," Harper said, his voice tinged with resignation. "We'll have to go to the last measure." General Donovan, a battle-hardened officer with graying hair, stared at the screen. "The prototype? Are you certain?" Harper nodded. "We've only tested it once, but it's all we have left. If it works, we'll have a chance. If it doesn't, we'll lose everything." The prototype was a last-ditch weapon developed in secret by a team of the brightest human scientists and engineers. A pulse weapon designed to disrupt the structural integrity of alien ships. It wasn't much compared to the Empire's vast arsenal, but it was their only hope. Humanity had never fought a war against a species so technologically superior. The prototype was humanity's final trump card. If it could penetrate the Empire's shielding, it could potentially shatter the Empire's ships. But the theory had never been tested on such a massive scale. The risk was immense. As Zartak's fleet moved closer to Earth, human forces scrambled to activate their last line of defense. The pulse weapon, located in a secluded underground base, was their best chance. The weapon had been designed to send a concentrated electromagnetic burst that would bypass the shields of the Empire's ships, directly destabilizing their molecular structure. The pulse would not destroy the ships immediately, but it would weaken their integrity, making them vulnerable to additional attacks. The key question was whether it would work at all. The Empire's ships were advancing rapidly, their weapons already charging for the first strike. Zartak felt no fear. His ships were invulnerable, and the humans would crumble before them. Earth's last defenses were nothing more than a nuisance. He stood proudly as the massive fleet approached the atmosphere, his voice cold as he ordered the attack. "Prepare to bombard the surface," he commanded. "We will make an example of these pathetic humans." On Earth, the countdown for the pulse weapon was nearing its final moments. The energy levels were unstable, fluctuating wildly. In the control room, the scientists and engineers were working frantically to stabilize the system. Sweat dripped down their faces as the pressure mounted. "We're almost there," said Dr. Amara, the lead scientist on the project. "One more minute, just one more minute." General Donovan stood by her side, his hands clenched into fists. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was all going to fall apart. The Empire was too powerful. No one had ever faced them in battle and survived. But they had no choice. They had to try. Finally, the countdown hit 0. "Firing the pulse," Dr. Amara announced, her voice barely a whisper. The weapon discharged a brilliant burst of energy, a wave that crackled with intensity. For a moment, it seemed like nothing had happened. Zartak watched as his fleet continued its approach, unconcerned by the insignificant human attempt. Then, something impossible occurred. One of the Empire's ships, the closest to Earth's atmosphere, suddenly shuddered. Its shields flickered, then collapsed entirely. A massive fracture appeared along the ship's hull, spreading rapidly as if the ship were made of fragile glass. The Imperium's crew was thrown into chaos. "What is this?" Zarthak shouted, his eyes widening in disbelief. "What's happening?" The Imperium's hull groaned, and the entire ship buckled. A massive explosion erupted from within as the ship's structural integrity failed completely. It wasn't a direct hit from a weapon, it was the pulse weapon. The wave of energy had done what no one had believed possible. It had broken the ship's unbreakable design. At Earth's command center, stunned silence reigned. General Donovan could hardly believe what he was seeing. The Empire's flagship, the symbol of their invincibility, was falling apart before their eyes. It was only the first ship, but the message was clear. The Empire's arrogance had blinded them to the possibility of failure. Zarthak's words echoed in Donovan's mind, Unbreakable. It was a lie. And humanity had just proved it. Then, another ship in the fleet, the Vigilance, was struck. The same energy burst caused its shields to falter, and the ship began to tremble, its surface cracking in a similar fashion to the Imperium. A ripple of panic spread through the Empire's command structure. The Vigilance was a vessel of legendary design, said to be even more durable than the Imperium. And yet, it was failing. One after another, the Empire's invincible ships began to crack, revealing the hidden flaw in their technology. Their superiority was no longer assured. "Retreat!" Zarthak bellowed, his confidence shattered. "Order the fleet to fall back. Prepare for emergency evacuation." But the damage was already done. The Empire's command structure was thrown into disarray. As more ships fell, the once feared fleet began to disintegrate. The humans had struck back with a weapon that defied all logic, all expectations. What was once thought impossible was now reality. The Empire's invincible fleet was no match for humanity's ingenuity. On Earth, the resistance forces cheered, but they knew the battle was far from over. The pulse weapon had caused the first cracks in the Empire's fleet, but the war was just beginning. Humanity's survival would depend on whether they could continue to exploit this newfound weakness before the Empire could adapt. But for the first time in history, the balance of power had shifted. The Empire's ships were no longer unbreakable. The humans had a chance. The Resistance had a fighting chance. The fleet of the Galactic Empire was in chaos. What was supposed to be a simple show of force, a swift strike to crush humanity, had descended into a nightmare. The unthinkable had happened. The Imperium, the pride of the Empire, had taken damage. Not just superficial damage, but catastrophic failure. Zarthak, the Supreme Commander, stood in disbelief on the command bridge. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly that his knuckles were white. It didn't make sense. His fleet had been unbeatable. No weapon in the galaxy had ever come close to piercing their shields, let alone causing such destruction. Yet here they were, losing ships one by one. "Report!" Zarthak barked. A lieutenant hesitated before responding. "The Imperium has sustained major hull damage. We are losing structural integrity across multiple sectors. The energy pulse, it's bypassing our shields. We cannot contain it." Zarthak's eyes narrowed. He had underestimated humanity. In his arrogance, he had thought Earth would be an easy conquest, an insignificant planet, its people no different from the countless races they had subjugated. But now, that mistake had become clear. The humans had done the impossible. They had found a way to defeat the Empire's invulnerable technology. "How many more ships have been affected?" Zarthak asked, his voice now tight with rage. "The Vigilance has suffered critical damage as well. The Dominion is showing signs of instability. At least 30 ships are reporting varying levels of hull fractures." The lieutenant's voice faltered. "We don't know how many more will follow." Zarthak's mind raced. It wasn't just the loss of ships, it was the loss of confidence. His fleet had been the envy of the galaxy. The Empire's pride and joy. They had boasted for centuries that no force could ever breach their defenses. And yet, a small, insignificant species had found a weakness, a way to dismantle their greatest weapon with a single shot. It was unthinkable. He looked at the tactical display. Earth's defenses were minimal at best, but somehow, the humans had managed to exploit their advantage. The pulse weapon wasn't just effective, it was devastating. It disrupted the Empire's ships at a molecular level, bypassing their shields and causing their hulls to fracture and collapse. Zardhak had never seen anything like it, and neither had any of his commanders. "Order all ships to disengage," Zardhak ordered, his voice a low growl. "We need to retreat and reassess." The retreat was chaotic. The Empire's once mighty fleet was now a shattered collection of ships, many of which had already sustained irreparable damage. The humans' unexpected resistance had exposed a fundamental flaw in the Empire's technology. No one had anticipated that the Unbreakable ships could fall. But fall they had. On Earth, the first signs of victory rippled through the human forces. General Donovan watched in stunned disbelief as one Empire ship after another buckled and collapsed under the pulse weapon's assault. His team had hoped that the weapon might work, but the reality was beyond their expectations. This was no longer a battle for survival. It was a battle to reclaim Earth's future. "We've done it," Donovan said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've actually done it." Dr. Amara, the lead scientist who had helped develop the pulse weapon, was at the command center, watching the data pour in. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. The pulse weapon had exceeded even her wildest projections. It wasn't just disabling the Empire's ships, it was breaking them apart. "We need to keep pushing," Amara said, urgency in her tone. "We can't let them regroup. If we give them time, they'll adapt, and we'll be back to square one." Donovan nodded, rallying the troops. They had gained ground, but they weren't out of danger yet. The Empire's fleet was in disarray, but it wouldn't be long before they regrouped and launched a counteroffensive. The resistance forces needed to act quickly. Back on the Imperium, Zardhak's orders came fast and furious. The retreat was not as orderly as he would have liked. The damage was more severe than expected, and some ships had already begun to break apart. The Empire's entire command structure was in disarray, and their once feared superiority had crumbled in a matter of hours. "We need to stabilize the fleet," Zardhak muttered, pacing the bridge. "Activate the emergency repair systems. Deploy the remaining reserve ships." The lieutenant who had delivered the previous reports stepped forward, hesitating before speaking. "Supreme Commander, the human forces are using guerrilla tactics. Their counterattacks are relentless. We cannot keep retreating forever." Zardhak's eyes narrowed. "Guerrilla tactics? They are nothing more than an insect scurrying underfoot. They will break." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. His fleet was crippled, and the humans were far more resourceful than he had given them credit for. Across the battlefield, human forces were adapting. They were no longer just defending Earth, they were taking the fight to the Empire. They used every advantage, every weakness, and every opportunity that presented itself. The pulse weapon had made the Empire's ships vulnerable, and humanity wasn't about to waste that opportunity. As Earth's forces launched their counterattacks, Zardhak scrambled to regain control. The Empire had never been forced into such a position. For the first time in centuries, they were on the defensive. The once unbreakable fleet was being destroyed by a single, unforeseen weapon, and the humans were relentless in their pursuit of victory. "Prepare the remaining ships," Zardhak ordered, his voice harsh with frustration. "We will not allow these insects to defy the might of the Empire. Re-engage at full power. Let them taste the true force of the Empire." But his orders came too late. The Empire's leadership, once so certain of their dominance, was fractured. As the remaining ships attempted to regroup, the pulse weapon continued to wreak havoc. Earth's forces had learned from their first strikes, refining their tactics. They were no longer simply reacting to the Empire's moves, they were dictating the pace of the battle. The Empire's fleet, once so proud, was now scrambling for survival. As the battle raged on, Zarthak watched helplessly as more ships fell, one by one. Each fracture, each crack in their once unbreakable hulls was a testament to the unexpected power of humanity. The impossible had happened. The Empire's fleet, once considered invincible, was breaking apart. And Zarthak knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The Empire's arrogance had led them here, and now, they were facing the consequences. On Earth, the resistance forces were far from celebrating. They had won a major victory, but the war was not yet over. The Empire still had power, still had resources, and still had the will to fight. But for the first time, humanity stood a chance. The humans had not only withstood the Empire's might, they had struck back with an unprecedented force. And as the battle for Earth continued, the galaxy would remember one thing above all: humanity was not to be underestimated. The tide of battle had shifted irrevocably in humanity's favor. Despite the Empire's superior technology and overwhelming numbers, their once unbreakable fleet was falling apart piece by piece, crippled by a weapon they had never anticipated. The damage to their ships was not just structural, it was psychological. The Empire's commanders had spent centuries building their power on the belief that their technology made them invincible. That belief was now shattered, and with it, the Empire's confidence. Zarthak stood in the midst of the chaos aboard the Imperium, his once proud flagship. The ship was limping through space, its massive hull cracked in several places, its weapons systems severely damaged. The bridge was eerily quiet, save for the sounds of alarms blaring and officers scrambling to assess the damage. Zarthak's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan, but every strategy he considered seemed inadequate. The humans were relentless, their tactics brutal and effective. "Commander," the communications officer said, voice trembling, "we've lost contact with the fleet's rear guard. They're reporting significant damage. We've lost more than half of our ships." Zarthak's grip tightened on the armrest of his command chair. It was hard to process the magnitude of the situation. The Empire had never faced anything like this. In all their years of conquest, no enemy had ever posed a threat on this scale. Yet here they were, outmaneuvered and outclassed by a species they had deemed insignificant. "What are the status of the remaining ships?" Zarthak asked, trying to hold on to whatever semblance of command he could. "Most of them are in critical condition. The Vigilance has fallen back. The Dominion is attempting to withdraw. The rest are scattered. We're losing control, Commander." Zarthak gritted his teeth. "I will not be humiliated by a pack of primitives." At the human command center, General Donovan knew the battle wasn't over, but victory was within reach. Earth's forces had made significant headway, but the Empire was far from defeated. As the remaining ships of the Galactic fleet continued to retreat, Donovan understood that the Empire would not give up without a fight. Their pride would push them to retaliate with everything they had left. "We need to press our advantage," Donovan said, his voice sharp with determination. "Their fleet is scattered, but they're not done. We need to strike before they regroup." Dr. Amara was already at work, scanning the data. "We've identified several key weaknesses in their fleet. The pulse weapon has been incredibly effective, but we need to take out their command structure. If we cripple their remaining ship's leadership, we can end this now." "Do it," Donovan ordered. "Coordinate with our strike teams. We hit them where it hurts." Humanity's strategy was now a well-oiled machine. They had turned the tables so quickly that the Empire had been left reeling. Earth's forces used everything at their disposal: precision strikes, decoy tactics, and the ongoing advantage provided by the pulse weapon. The Empire's ships were limping, retreating, and struggling to regain their footing, but humanity's forces were methodical and efficient, cutting off any attempt at recovery. The Empire's remaining fleet was now on the back foot, trying to salvage what remained of their honor. In deep space, the Vigilance was still operational, though severely damaged. The commander of the Vigilance, Captain Oren, had been watching the retreat unfold with growing frustration. He had never imagined that an alien species, a race so far behind technologically, would be capable of such a strategic assault. The humans were proving to be far more resourceful and capable than they had ever been given credit for. They had taken the fight to the Empire with an unrelenting fury that left no room for mistakes. Orin knew the Vigilance had one final chance to make a difference. If the humans continued to press their attacks, it was only a matter of time before the last of the fleet was destroyed. But he also knew the Empire's reputation was at stake. He could not let this defeat stand. He rallied his remaining officers and ordered a counteroffensive. "Prepare for final engagement," Orin commanded. "We fight to the last ship." Back on Earth, the situation was becoming more critical by the minute. The Empire's remaining ships were not giving up easily. The Vigilance had rallied its forces, and other ships were regrouping. Earth's forces had gained the upper hand, but they couldn't afford to underestimate the Empire now. A single mistake could turn the tide back in the Empire's favor. "General Donovan, we've received reports that the remaining Imperial ships are preparing to re-engage," one of the officers said, urgency in his voice. "We know they won't go down without a fight," Donovan replied grimly. "But we've already seen that they're not invincible. We've weakened them, and now it's time to finish it." The pulse weapon had proven its worth. It had destabilized the Empire's ships in ways no one thought possible. Yet, the Empire's arrogance had ensured that their forces were still formidable. Even in retreat, they were a force to be reckoned with. The remaining human forces were doing their best to capitalize on the damage the pulse weapon had caused, but time was running out. The Empire's ships were beginning to reorganize, and their counteroffensive was gaining momentum. Zarthak knew this was his last chance. If he failed now, the Empire would crumble. The humans had proven that they could bring down the Unbreakable, that they were a threat that had to be eradicated, no matter the cost. He rallied his remaining fleet, directing them toward Earth with renewed determination. "Target their command centers," Zarthak ordered, his voice cold and calculated. "If we can destroy their leadership, their forces will collapse. The humans may be resilient, but they cannot survive without direction." Zarthak's plan was simple: eliminate the leaders, and the humans would lose their will to fight. The remaining ships in the fleet surged forward, preparing for one final assault. On Earth, the Resistance knew what was coming. General Donovan had anticipated this. The Empire would throw everything they had left into a final push, hoping to destroy Earth's leadership and cripple their resistance. But humanity had one advantage the Empire couldn't account for: the pulse weapon. Earth's forces had already adapted, honing their tactics, learning from every engagement. The Empire's final counteroffensive was about to be met with a force that was more than ready for it. "Get the pulse weapons into position," Donovan ordered. "We end this now." The final battle was upon them, and for the first time since the Empire had arrived, it was clear that the tables had irrevocably turned. The humans were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to reclaim their future, and they would not let the Empire take that away from them. The remnants of the Galactic Empire's fleet may have been formidable, but their time had passed. Humanity had proven, once and for all, that they would never be underestimated again. The final confrontation was underway. Zarthak, once confident in the invincibility of the Empire, now found himself fighting for survival. His fleet, reduced to a fraction of its former strength, had regrouped for a final, desperate push. The once proud Imperium limped through space, its once unshakable hull now shattered, its weapons systems struggling to maintain power. Earth's forces, although battered and bruised, had adapted to the Empire's tactics and were now more prepared than ever. The pulse weapon, the key to humanity's victory, was about to make its most critical impact yet. Zarthak's voice echoed through the bridge of the Imperium, calm but laced with the cold edge of desperation. "All remaining ships, concentrate fire on the enemy leadership. We cannot allow them to organize. Take them down before they regroup." The remaining ships, now scattered but still powerful, adjusted their formation, preparing for their final assault. Zarthak's plan was simple: obliterate the humans' command structure, and, in doing so, destabilize their resistance. They had done it before in countless other campaigns, and he believed it would work again. But for the first time in his career, doubt crept into his mind. He had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now, it was too late to turn back. Back on Earth, General Donovan was coordinating the final push. Earth's forces had learned from each encounter. Every countermeasure, every failure had taught them more about the Empire's weaknesses. The pulse weapon, the key to their success, was ready for its last deployment. It was no longer just a defense, it was a weapon of offense, aimed directly at the Empire's heart. "We've got this," Donovan muttered under his breath, though the weight of the decision pressed heavily on him. "This is the end for them." The human forces had the upper hand in numbers, but it was their ingenuity that had given them a fighting chance. The Empire had come with overwhelming force, relying on their ships' impenetrable armor and advanced weaponry. Yet the Empire's greatest strength had been their arrogance. They had believed their technology would see them through, and now that same technology had become their greatest weakness. The pulse weapon had disabled the Empire's shields and bypassed their defenses in ways Zartak could never have predicted. As Earth's forces prepared for the final attack, Zartak's fleet, though still formidable, was reeling. Ships that had once been indestructible were now vulnerable. Humanity had proven it could adapt, learn, and strike where the Empire was weakest. In the deep silence of space, Zartak watched as the last of his ships advanced, weapons locked on the human command center. He could feel the weight of the moment. If they could strike down Donovan and his forces, the humans would collapse. But deep inside, he knew this wasn't just about victory anymore. This was about survival. His survival. The survival of the Empire. "Fire!" Zartak ordered, his voice low but full of deadly intent. The remaining Empire ships unleashed a barrage of firepower, their weapons tearing through space toward the heart of Earth's defenses. But Donovan was ready. The pulse weapon had been deployed, its signature energy signature unmistakable. It pulsed outward, and the energy waves hit their targets, sending ripples of destruction through the Empire's fleet. Zartak's ship shuddered as the pulse weapon hit its shields, bypassing them as easily as a knife through paper. He watched, helpless, as the Imperium began to break apart under the onslaught. "Captain?" one of his officers cried out. "Hull breach on multiple levels! We're losing control!" Zartak's gaze hardened. He would not surrender. Not now. Not ever. The Empire had come too far, conquered too much, to be brought down by a single, insignificant species. He slammed his fist against the console, his voice a furious growl. "Continue the attack! Don't let them win!" But the tide had already turned. Earth's forces, empowered by the pulse weapon and their unyielding will, continued their counterattack. The Empire's remaining ships had nowhere to hide. Every move they made was countered by humanity's superior tactics. Even in retreat, the Empire was crumbling. The humans were too tenacious. They had tasted victory and would not back down now. On the surface of Earth, celebrations were beginning to break out. It was a moment of triumph, but the battle was not yet over. Earth's forces had done what had seemed impossible. They had driven back the Empire's invincible fleet. The remaining ships were retreating, and it was clear that the humans had won. But Donovan knew the cost of this victory. The Empire would not give up without a final blow. Zartak, desperate and cornered, would not stop until his fleet was destroyed or Earth was in ruins. This victory was important, but it was only one step in what would be a long and difficult road. "We've won this round," Donovan said, his voice steady, though his mind was already turning to the next phase of the battle. "But it's not over. We need to stay vigilant." Dr. Amara, ever the pragmatist, nodded. "Agreed. We've broken their fleet, but the Empire's leadership will not let this go. They will regroup. We need to prepare for the next phase." In space, Zartak's eyes were cold, his mind a whirl of fury and calculation. His flagship was falling apart, but he refused to accept defeat. If he had to fight to the last ship, he would. But he also knew that the humans had the advantage now. Their strategy had outflanked the Empire's, and their technology had found a way to bypass what had been thought of as the greatest defense in the galaxy. His mind raced, calculating his options. Could he escape? Could he regroup with the remnants of his fleet? Could he fight on, even with his flagship disabled and his fleet in ruins? Zarthak's pride would not allow him to retreat, not without exacting a heavy price. "We are the Empire," he muttered to himself. "We are invincible." But the words sounded hollow now, as if even he didn't believe them anymore. The Imperium had been destroyed. His fleet had been shattered. And Earth, that insignificant planet, had proven that it could fight back. Humanity had proven its worth, not just in its technology, but in its unbreakable will to survive. Zarthak's last order came as a grim acknowledgement of his defeat. "Prepare to abandon ship." The remnants of the Empire's fleet scattered, their ships crippled, their pride in tatters. The battle for Earth had been won, but the war was far from over. The Empire had been humbled, but humanity's victory came at a cost. The fight for freedom was only beginning, and Earth's forces would need to continue their vigilance to ensure that the Empire would never again rise to threaten them. For humanity, the victory was bittersweet. They had proven that they could overcome even the greatest of odds. The Empire's fall would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. And for the first time in history, humanity stood not as the underdog, but as a force to be reckoned with.